The economy, to all intents and purposes, are looking good. I mean, we're seeing what's happening to the city. The city is appreciating. Just yesterday or so, we saw a publication with the Ghana Statistical Services saying that the economy grew by a certain percentage. I've forgotten exactly what the figure is. So basically, the macro indicators are beginning to look good. Now, of course, your critics have asked, what intervention, policy intervention, in fact, state one policy intervention that the NDC has put in place to record these macro indicators that we're seeing, and that's what actually is the case, as your critics have said. Of course, I'm talking about the NPP, which is that, after all, based on what we're beginning to see, the NPP is claiming that they handed over a good economy to the NDC government, a robust economy to the NDC.
A good board, or a haphazard way of marketing
and that is why you're recording these economic indicators.
And I'm saying yes, under a haphazard system where anybody could just come and take our good and go away, literally speaking. I'm not yes.
Yes, I get it. I get it.
Right? Or under a gold board structure. That harness, is not. It's self-economic thinking, and concurrently stopping, the devastation, of the forest. How could you do the two things concurrently?
You're talking about Galamsey.
Galamsey, right? His Excellency has said that, of course, it doesn't mean that they won't try and go back. But out of the 8 forests, there was 1 left, and he has said that we're even retrieving that, from, so it means that there's some control taking place, right? But what has come with the difference is, the structure that has been put in place to harness, the purchases and sales of, gold. And that's what's yielding the results. If it was possible, under a laissez-faire regime, how come we did not have the same stability?
Right.
If it was possible, how come we didn't have the same stability? Yeah, you can hand over something in a bit of a haphazard way, right? The reverse. I can say with confidence that we created a slab to take off IPP debts. We handed it over. Don't we still have the IPP debts higher than even when, when we set it up? How come, at least the first flows of ESLA, we didn't just leave an empty ESLA. The first flows of ESLA, 500 million Ghana cedis, was used to inject liquidity to the banks from whom VRA had borrowed. You can Google it. As a result of which, we had a joint committee with the banks. That said, the remainder of the VRA debt, which emanates from the inability to pay subsidy, to them, and for which they had to borrow during the breach in the pipeline and lack of flow of gas, 2.2 billion, right? We had signed to say that it will be paid over a period of 2.5 years or so, in installments as the ESLA came in. So, by comparison, we also handled something. They did collateralize, thinking that, if you collateralize, it means that you are taking a loan. By the way, we left a $600 million term sheet from Afrism to pay that as a deposit, just like the 550, these US dollars, to pay the IPPs, some deposits. They were about to bring their, bankers and others, just as we did with some of them foreign banks, so that we can have a deal with them and use the extra revenue, the forex element, to start, liquidating. So these were things that we left, right? Why were they discontinued? In comparison to what they are saying, we even left structures in place. Sinking fund, why was it stopped? Is it the consequence that we defaulted? So I'm saying that if we followed what they did, we would have continued with the haphazard way with gold was, who was being marketed. And I was doing a consultancy in Turkey, with Iraqis, because we agreed to meet there. And everybody was all over me. Oh,
why?
We hear you are an advisor to the president. We want you to come and buy gold.
Buy gold from you?
No, from the country. So
yes.
I should give them some exposure, to maybe talk to people, who have
so they don't know that times have changed.
I told them we had changed. Luckily at the time, we were thinking about the gold board. So I told them we had changed. We had changed the structure. And
so
then they will
in
have
the
to
past,
register
in the
with the
past,
gold
they would have bought this gold, taken it outside Ghana, and it would have been all accounted for.
Well, you can ask them to come and explain the structure that was in place in their claiming credit. So I'm saying something substantive actually happened. Right? And I don't take all the credit. In fact, much of it, were happening, by separate committees. I was preoccupied with macro and other things. So I'm not even taking credit for that. But it comes, to cabinet and to which I have the privilege of attending, or the president may have a discussion with you, on so yeah, that's the role I play.
You don't credit them for the gold reserves, 30.1 tons, which they left. You've only added 1.9 tons. You don't credit the NPP for that?
They could have done better.
Which is anchoring the strength of the city.
They could have done better. I'm not taking anything away, from what they did on the former side. I'm only saying that it was a haphazard way of doing things. Yeah, remember it was Bank of Ghana. Why did they first stop Bank of Ghana? Or advise Bank of Ghana? It's not a real sector institution to be buying gold. Because it could buy gold for its bullion, for its reserve and other requirements. Right? So we put the real sector structure in place just as you have a cocoa board. And then you now have to also, as I said, Exim Bank and others have to come in because, we formalize gold now, as we did, cocoa. President has spoken about cashew and others. That is the non-traditional exports. And the avenue for that one is Exim Bank, which is getting the ED fund, continues to get the ED fund to give domestic loans. A lot of domestic loans were given Exim Bank. You can invite them for a discussion, right? But when you give them the loan, then you ring fence like cocoa borders. And there are some of them, they have larger entities. The Tema Enclave, who are doing exports from cables to, whatever, to the sub-region and beyond. AFCTA, that's how you practicalize it. Right? So the Exim Bank is now going to be focusing on exports. You give city loans, you focus on exports, you ring-fence the revenue, and because an individual who needs 10 million, US dollars, may not get a favorable, access to that credit externally, and they have to go to local banks. Exim Bank steps in 10 times, 100, 10 million times 100 is what? Whatever the amount, big sum of money, right? They syndicate on their behalf. That's what China Exim does. You can Google. China Exim is rated.
Korea and all this will rake in some forex, which would come and show up there.
Yes, it's in that it would enhance their ability to generate the forex. Because when they are unable, like cocoa board, my grandfather is a cocoa farmer. My family is cocoa farmers in Western region. What's up? But how do I, even sitting here, former finance minister, how do I access, $5,000 US dollars for them on their own individual to manage the farms and the rest? Similarly, our exporters who are even doing bigger things need help. And that is why we are serving the Exim Bank. Okay. It wasn't to look back.
Right.
It was to take whatever was they were doing, domestically and translate it, like cocoa board to enable them borrow on behalf of or facilitate borrowing by, it's their money.
Okay.
It's their exports.
Right.
Yes.
Now, speaking about exports, help us understand this. Why did the president say that what's the philosophy driving what the president said, which is that the government is looking at stabilizing or capping or ceiling or putting a ceiling to the appreciation of the cedi to about between 10 and 12? Because I've heard some economists and some industry watchers say that singular comment began to have an adverse impact on the appreciation of the cedi, because there were some persons who wanted to go and sell their dollars and get their cedis, and then the president said, okay, I want to cap it at 10.
He didn't say cap. He says that
between 10 and 12. He's looking at between 10 and 12.
Yes.
So that it doesn't affect exporters. Remember, it was a
it's a
meeting between him and
management
exporters.
scheme. It's a management scheme.
Explain why this is important.
No, it's very important.
Why?
Crises are inevitable.
Yes.
Like we were saying a moment ago. Overnight, crude oil prices have gone up. Right?
Yes.
We had a scheme, a strategic store scheme,
Yes.
which was stopped, where when crude oil prices fell, we bought crude,
Yes.
right, for boss to put in his tanks. That's how we stopped petrocubes.
Right.
And then when the price keeps going up, you release. Because that's what boss was established to do.
Right.
You release. So if you stopped at 40, right, when the price was low, and you put some oil in their tanks, as the price creeps above 40, 45, 50, it's tolerable. Remember that crude oil prices fell sharply when we were in office.
Yes.
Right?
2015 it affected you
Yes,
badly.
so up to $55 per barrel, 60 perhaps. You know, the consumer does not feel it. Once it begins to rise 65, 70, right, 65, 70, it has an impact on your domestic price. What is wrong in saying that, therefore, let me work with boss, you know, to put some strategic stock when it is 40, in order that we'll keep the strategic stock, and when it starts hitting 50, 55, we'll release it. This management will release it in order that, after all, it is the money that was generated that we're using, the levy. So let's then release it to enable us stabilize, you know, transport fares and the rest in the economy. Right? And that means that immediately the price begins to, so when it's selling at 65, 70, and in our case it shot up to 100.
Yes.
Right. In fact, we did the budget with $99, and then it fell to 45. This is where the thing started to crystallize. We had it already. Okay. So you have a floor. And you are saying that immediately it starts coming from down to, from say 50, and it's going down, you know, back then, you know, at those prices, fill the tanks. So you are saying that, you know, up to about 30, where it may never go again because of OPEC and all of those. So you have a floor, and you have a ceiling, right? And you are releasing fuel within the floor, especially when it's going up. Sorry, above the floor when it's going up. So you don't want to cross, you know, the ceiling with your strategic stock management and other reserve funds. Why? Because it will affect, you know, transport prices, and it will affect your inflation. It will reverse your inflation.
But the CD performance,
So-
isn't it rather a
no,
function
so wait a
of
minute. So
market
wait a minute.
forces?
No, so wait a minute.
Yes.
So gold prices
Yes.
were, remember gold prices were, you know, were also increasing
Yes.
at the time we were, you know, restructuring and whatever,
Yes.
right? Which management led to, you know, the strengthening of gold price and our reserves. So what is wrong in saying that, oh, okay, so we have observed that we can bring, you know, we used to bring it down to 15 all the time. But because we were building reserves, right? Because we were building reserves, it came below 13, it came below 12. The magic is the reserves. So what is wrong in saying that? We know that gold price, we know that for now, right, the exchange rate, because it depends on what I was talking, Exim Bank, exports, before you are able to strengthen that. It's not likely that we could have it go down, you know. So it's your medium term, you know, objective, as the governor said, to bring it to single digits.
All right.
When he says medium term, he knows that there are forces which he doesn't control.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So we are saying, what President Mahama is saying, that now that we know that with a certain activity, you know, like the tariffs in the US, you know, Iran.
The Trump tariffs.
Iran, Saudi Arabia, what they do with oil and the rest, we are not in total control. So why don't we say that our best rate policy, would be 10, 11. But let us build reserves when the prices are in that range, so that when it starts going up 15, in other words, you are suspending consumption. Which we do in households and everywhere. You suspend, consumption. That's why you save. So why don't we keep the reserves? Why don't we save that? So that when it begins to, cross 13, 14, and the 15, which may be your ceiling, you begin to, the reserves that you have kept, you begin to release it. Because the second example or incidents which I want to point out is, we know that there will be a dry season. We are now in the rainy season.
Yeah.
The rains have been good, right? Luckily, it's no drought, right? So the food index will go down. But there will be a dry season. But it's not just a reserve policy.
Right.
It's saying that let us add value. Let us store, the food that has gone into waste and everything. These are all complaints. So they are complementing. So you see that I've come from, the debt, which we don't want to exceed 60, right? To the deficit, which is in the law, we don't want to exceed, 5%. Those are ceilings.
Okay.
So you set a floor.
Right.
Because it goes down to a certain point before it starts going up.
Okay.
So it's a management scheme.
Okay.
It's not a control scheme. The president is not saying that I'm going to direct, the governor, come what may, to keep the price at 10. No, that would be even against, you can't even manage that.
Okay.